Structural realism. Kenneth Waltz. Kenneth Waltz was an influential American political scientist and international relations scholar. He is best known for his work on the theory of international politics, essentially the foundational figure in neorealism, or structural realism, within the field of international relations. Waltz's most notable works include Man, the State and War 1959, and Theory of International Politics 1979. In Man, the State and War, Waltz explores the roots of warfare through the analysis of the levels of analysis, the individual, the state, and the international system. This framework helped to categorize different explanations for conflict and cooperation in international relations. Kenneth Waltz's Man, the State, and War is a seminal text in the field of international relations that analyzes the causes of war through three images or levels of analysis: the individual, the state, and the international system. Each level provides a different perspective on why conflicts arise and how they might be resolved. 1. The first image, the individual. Here, Waltz examines the characteristics of human nature and individual leaders that might lead to conflict. Theories at this level often focus on psychological and moral aspects of human behavior, suggesting that wars occur because of aggressive tendencies, misperceptions, or poor decision-making by leaders. In Man, the State and War, Kenneth Waltz's first image, the individual examines how inherent traits and behaviors of leaders and human nature can lead to conflict. Theories at this level focus on the psychological and moral aspects of human behavior, suggesting that aggressive tendencies, misperceptions, and poor decision-making by leaders can drive nations into war. This perspective highlights the importance of individual actions and choices in the causation of international conflicts, suggesting that personal characteristics and the quality of leadership play critical roles in the emergence of warfare. By exploring these individual factors, Waltz underscores the complex interplay between human nature and international relations outcomes. 2. The second image, the state. This level considers the internal structure of states. Waltz discusses how the organization of a society and its political institutions drive states towards conflict. Different types of government, economic systems, and social structures can influence how states behave in the international arena, potentially leading to aggressive policies or wars. Kenneth Waltz's second image in Man, the State, and War focuses on the internal structure of states, examining how the organization of societies and their political institutions can drive states towards conflict. Waltz argues that different types of governments, economic systems, and social structures can greatly influence state behavior in the international arena. For instance, authoritarian regimes might pursue aggressive foreign policies to divert attention from domestic issues, while democracies might be constrained by public opinion and legal checks. This level of analysis highlights how the internal characteristics of states such as political stability, economic performance, and social cohesion can lead to aggressive policies or wars. As states interact under the pressures and opportunities presented by the international system, Waltz's exploration of the state structure provides a crucial lens for understanding the varied motivations behind state actions and their impacts on global peace and conflict. 3. The third image, the international system, the most innovative aspect of Waltz's analysis. This level looks at the anarchic structure of the international system, where no central authority enforces rules or norms. This anarchy compels states to act out of a self-help instinct, often prioritizing survival and power, which can lead to conflicts, as states try to secure their position against potential threats. Kenneth Waltz's third image, the international system, is a cornerstone of his analysis. In Man, the State and War, this level addresses the anarchic nature of the international system, characterized by the absence of a central authority to enforce rules or norms. Within this anarchic structure, states operate under a self-help principle, primarily driven by concerns for survival and power. This dynamic compels states to prioritize their security and interests, often leading to conflicts as they seek to bolster their positions against potential threats. Waltz's insight into how the international system structure influences state behavior underscores the fundamental challenges of global politics, where the lack of overarching authority leads states to assume others might pose threats, thereby perpetuating a cycle of power competition and conflict. This innovative perspective highlights the structural forces at play in international relations, shaping our understanding of why conflicts emerge and persist in global affairs. Waltz argues that understanding these three images is crucial for comprehensively addressing the causes of war and developing strategies for peace. His framework has not only provided a robust analytical tool for scholars, but also influenced policymakers in thinking about how to structure international relations and prevent conflicts. This multilevel approach encourages a more nuanced view of international relations, moving beyond simplistic explanations and considering the complex interplay of factors that influence state behavior and the dynamics of the international system. II. Theory of international politics develops the idea that the international system structure, defined by the anarchic condition of no overarching authority above states, compels states to prioritize survival and power. Waltz's theory emphasizes that the structure of the international system influences the behavior of states, rather than the internal characteristics of individual states. Kenneth Waltz's theory of international politics advances the idea that the structure of the international system, defined by its anarchic nature without an overarching authority to govern state actions, fundamentally shapes how states behave. Waltz argues that this lack of a global sovereign forces states into a self-help condition, where survival and power become their primary objectives. This structural approach is a departure from earlier theories that place more emphasis on the internal characteristics of states. such as type of government, economic conditions, and national culture. Walz's structural realism, or neuralism, posits that it is not the internal makeup of states, whether they are democratic or authoritarian, rich or poor, but rather their position in the international system that most significantly influences their behavior. This theory suggests that all states, regardless of internal politics or culture, face the same anarchic international environment and thus respond in ways that ensure their survival and attempt to maintain or increase their power. By focusing on the international structure, Walz's theory helps explain why states that seem different internally often behave similarly in foreign affairs. For instance, regardless of a state's political system, it will likely view military capability as essential to its security. Due to the potential threat posed by other states, this results in patterns of behavior, such as arms races and alliances, which are driven by the anarchic layout of the international system rather than by specific national characteristics. Theory of international politics thus provides a framework for understanding international relations that emphasizes systemic forces over individual state attributes, offering a powerful explanation for recurrent patterns of international behavior, including conflict and cooperation among states. His work has had a profound impact on how international relations are studied and understood, shaping both academic debate and practical policy considerations. II. Offensive realism, developed primarily by John Mearsheimer. Offensive realism, developed primarily by John Mearsheimer, is a theory in international politics that is seen as an extension of structural realism or neuralism, building on the basic framework provided by Kenneth Waltz's structural realism or neuralisms. Offensive realism asserts that the anarchic state of the international system compels nations to continuously pursue power to ensure their survival. According to this theory, all nations tend to expand their military and economic power to suppress potential rivals and maintain supreme status. This reflects a departure from merely seeking survival, as in Waltz's neuralism, suggesting that states strive to maximize their influence as much as possible. Offensive realism argues that the anarchic condition of the international system drives states into a relentless pursuit of power. Developed mainly by John Mearsheimer, this theory views states as continuously striving to expand their power to ensure their survival. The lack of centralized authority in the international system creates an environment where each state must secure its own security. In this environment, states choose strategies to expand their military and economic power to respond to uncertainties and potential threats. Offensive realism posits that states aim not just to survive, but to achieve a dominant position, which distinguishes it from Kenneth Waltz's neuralism. While Waltz's neuralism focuses primarily on states securing their survival, offensive realism suggests that states also seek to maximize their influence, and through this, gain a competitive edge in the international system.
So what is the neorealist theory?
Neorealism is a theory that basically says that states behave according to the structure of the international system. It's how states are organized, what the architecture of the international system looks like, that largely influences how those states behave. And the key organizing principle of the international system is anarchy. And anarchy basically says that there is no higher authority above states. States are like balls on a pool table, right? They have no higher authority that sits above them. And the neo-realist or structural realist argument is that in the absence of a higher authority that can protect states if they get into trouble, what those states will do is they will compete with each other for power, because power really matters for your survival. If you're a state in the international system, you want to be able to survive. Survival has to be your highest goal, because of course, if you don't survive, you can't pursue any of your other goals. But survival can be a very tricky goal in a system where there's no higher authority that can protect you if trouble comes. So to deal with that problem, you try and make yourself as powerful as possible. You want to look like Godzilla, because if you're Godzilla in the international system, you're really powerful. It's highly unlikely that any other state will attack you. So this is the sort of basic insight of neorealism, that the structure or the architecture of the international system, again, I'm focusing mainly on anarchy here, leaves states with little choice but to compete among themselves for power, because the more power you have, the more likely you are to survive.
Why do we need neorealist theory, and which phenomena do we want to explain with it?
Well, we need theories to understand how the world works. There's just no question that the world is an amazingly complicated place. And this includes international politics, of course. So for any individual, whether he or she is a policymaker or whether you're a student of international politics, what you're trying to do is make sense of the world. You're trying to figure out what are the principal forces that are driving state behavior. How can I get state A to do this? How can I get state B to do that? And to do that, you need theories. Theories are simplifications of reality. Given this complicated world out there, what you want are theories which simplify that reality and allow you to make sense of it. And what's nice about neorealism is that it is a very simple theory that people can use to help figure out how they think the world operates, how it works. And that allows people not only to understand the world, but allows them to think about what are the right or what are the wrong policies that states should pursue for their own benefit.
In which field of political science is neorealism mostly used, and can create a great advantage in using it?
Neorealism is mainly used, of course, in the subfield of international relations. And within the subfield of international relations, it tends to be employed more by people who study international security than international political economy. I do believe, nevertheless, that realism has a lot to say about political economy. But the fact is that it's people who study questions of war and peace, people who study questions about international security, that mainly focus on realism. That's the domain in where realism has its greatest impact. It's in the international security realm.
So what are the main limitations and the main critiques towards neorealism?
Well, the main limitation of neorealism is that, like any theory, it can't explain everything. My view is that theories, even the best theories, and I would consider neorealism to be among the best theories, can only explain about 75% of what happens in the world. That means that neorealism is wrong probably about 25% of the time. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, why is this the case? It's actually quite simple. What we're talking about is dealing with a really complicated world, a world that's very hard to make sense of. And what we do, as I said before, is we invent theories, which are simplifications of reality that help us understand that complicated world. Well, if you're going to simplify reality and come up with a simple theory, and simple theories are the best theories, that means you're going to leave some factors on the cutting room floor. In other words, some factors that matter in international politics are not going to be incorporated into your theory because you think they are not very important. Neorealism, or structural realism, pays little attention to domestic politics. It says you don't need domestic politics to understand how the world works. It's, again, the structure of the system that's largely determinative. But sometimes domestic politics really matters. And that factor that you left on the cutting room floor jumps up and influences a particular set of events. And in that case, neorealism is going to fail to tell you a lot about what is going on in the world because neorealism cannot account for domestic politics. Domestic politics is left out of neorealism. It's on the cutting room floor. But that's not to say domestic politics never matters. What the neorealists are saying is it only matters sometimes, and that's not very often. So I can afford to leave it out. But this is not to deny that there will be those occasions where domestic politics matters. So neorealism, like all theories, is a simplification of reality. And when you're talking about simplifying a complicated reality, there are going to be instances where neorealism fails the test. And of course, this would be true of all theories.
So why is it important that students are aware and study neorealism?
Well, I think that the main reason that any student of international politics wants to understand neorealism is because it is among the most powerful theories that we have in international relations. I would argue, not surprisingly, that I think it is the most powerful theory. I think if you really want to understand how international politics works, you can do no better than to focus on neorealism. For example, if you're interested in the question of whether China can rise peacefully, you need a theory to answer that question because, of course, we have no facts about the future. So if we're trying to predict whether China can rise peacefully, we need a theory. And I would maintain that the best theory for capturing the essence of this question of whether China can rise peacefully is neorealism. So it is a powerful theory that students should understand. Now, I want to be clear, this is not to say that every listener should think or conclude that neorealism is the best theory in the land. It may be the case that people come to the conclusion that some liberal theory like democratic peace theory is better at explaining real world events than neorealism. I concede that point. But what I would argue is that you want to understand neorealism or structural realism because it is one of the most important theories. And there are a lot of important scholars who think that it is among the best theories in our menu of different IR theories.
So what are some key readings that you would recommend someone who's interested in neorealism?
I think actually the best starting point is Thomas Hobbes's famous book, Leviathan. I think in the first part of the Leviathan, Hobbes does a brilliant job of laying out the basic outlines of neorealism. Of course, in the contemporary literature. Kenneth Waltz's book, Theory of International Politics, is considered by almost everybody to be a seminal work. And I think that would be a good book to look at. Waltz also wrote a very famous book called Man, State, and War, which is well worth looking at. And then, at the risk of sounding egotistical and plugging my own work, I think the book that I wrote, The Tragedy of Great Power Politics, is helpful for understanding the basic logics that underpin neorealism. So those would be, four good books, I think, to look at to get a grasp of what this realist enterprise is all about.